When I picked up the phone to ask my son Max when his wedding would be, my daughter-in-law Lena looked me right in the eye and said with a chilling smile, "Oh, we already got married yesterday. We only invited special people." The words hit me like a bucket of ice water. Special people. I, who for 3 years had paid their monthly rent of $500, bought every piece of furniture in their house, and filled their refrigerator when they had nothing to eat. I was not a special person. I stood there in the living room of my own house, holding the phone as if it weighed 1,000 pounds, watching my son avoid my gaze while Lena made herself comfortable on the sofa I had bought for them. The pale pink dress I had picked out for her wedding hung uselessly in my closet, along with the new shoes and the illusion of being part of the most important day of my only son's life. I had spent $200 on that dress, thinking about how nice I would look in Max's wedding photos in which I would never appear. For weeks, I had planned every detail. I had put money aside to give them $1,000 as a wedding gift. I had called my sister Diana in Chicago to tell her the good news. I had cleaned my house from top to bottom, thinking they might come celebrate with me after the ceremony. All of that collapsed in a second with those 4 poisoned words, "Only special people." Max finally lifted his gaze and said in a rehearsed-sounding voice, "Mom, it was an intimate thing, very small, just the 2 of us and the witnesses." But I knew it was a lie. I saw the photos on social media. I saw Lena's parents proudly posing next to the bride and groom. I saw her siblings toasting with champagne. I saw Lena's white dress, which I had helped finance with the $800 I had given her last month for her personal expenses. I saw everything I wasn't supposed to see. A week later, exactly 7 days after that humiliation, Lena called me with a completely different voice. She was no longer the confident woman who had excluded me from her wedding. Now she sounded desperate, almost pleading. "Renate, the rent is overdue. The landlord is pressuring us and says if we don't pay this week, he will kick us out. You forgot to make the transfer." Her voice trembled slightly, as if the world were ending. I was silent for a few seconds, remembering all the times I had run to the bank to make that transfer. All the times I had canceled my own plans to make sure they had a roof over their heads. All the times I had eaten beans and rice so I could give them money for their desires. And now, after they had excluded me from the most important moment of their lives, they had the audacity to call me as if nothing had happened. "Lena," I said with a calm that surprised even me, "didn't I warn you that I only help special people?" The silence on the other end of the line was so deep that I could hear my own heart beating. For the first time in years, it was not I who was trembling, but her. "Renate, I don't understand," she stammered. "We were always special to you. You're like a second mom to me." Lies. All lies. Wrapped in that sweet voice she only used when she needed something. The same voice she had used to ask me for money for the wedding dress, for the honeymoon, for the rings, which I had helped finance without knowing I would never see the ceremony where they were exchanged. For so many years, I had this constant feeling of walking on eggshells, weighing every word, every gesture, every gift, hoping to get a crumb of affection from my own son. I was the perfect mother, the obliging mother-in-law, the silent provider who never protested when they treated me like I was invisible. But that phrase, "only special people," awakened something in me that had been dormant for far too long. I had calculated in my head how much money I had spent on them in those 3 years. Between rent, food, gifts, emergencies, and whims, it was over $20,000. $20,000 I had taken from my retirement, from my savings, from the money my late husband had left, so I could live my last years in peace. And what was all that for? To be treated like a stranger on my own son's wedding day. That night after I hung up, I sat on my bed and cried. But they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of anger, of accumulated frustration, of years of silently endured humiliation. I cried for all the times they made me feel that my love was a burden, my presence a hindrance, my money the only thing I had to offer. I cried for the foolish mother I had been, for the woman who had lost herself trying to be indispensable to those who considered her dispensable. When I woke up the next morning, something inside me had changed. It was not just the pain of betrayal, it was something deeper, colder. I stood up and looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. The same tired eyes as always, the same wrinkles that told stories of years of giving love without getting it back. But there was something else in my gaze, a hardness I didn't recognize, a determination that had been buried under years of compliance. I went to the kitchen and made coffee, as I had every morning for 40 years, but this time I didn't think about calling Max to ask how he had slept. I didn't check my phone in anticipation of a message from him apologizing for the previous day's humiliation. For the first time in a long time, I was my own first concern of the day. I sat at the table where I had so often planned surprises for them, counted bills for their expenses, and cried silently when they treated me with indifference. Now, this table would be a witness to something completely different. I took out my checkbook, my bank statements, and started to do the math. I wanted to see, in exact numbers, the extent of my own foolishness. Monthly rent of $500 multiplied by 36 months was $18,000. Food and supplies, approximately $200 a month, was another $7,200. Birthday gifts, Christmas gifts, anniversary gifts, at least $3,000. Lena's medical emergencies, $800. The car loan they never paid me back, $2,500. The air conditioner repair in their apartment, $600. The living room furniture, $1,200, $33,400. That was the exact sum of my generosity. $33,400 I had wasted from my husband's inheritance, from my pension, from the savings I had put aside penny by penny for decades of honest work. All that money thrown out the window to keep two adults comfortable who couldn't even pretend to respect me. The phone rang, and I saw Max's name on the screen. Normally, my heart would have pounded as I ran to answer, hoping he would finally apologize and explain that everything had been a misunderstanding. But this time, I let it ring once, twice, 3 times. Finally, it fell silent, and I continued drinking my coffee as if nothing had happened. 10 minutes later, it rang again. This time, it was Lena. I let it ring too. Then a text came from Max. "Mom, please answer. We need to talk." I deleted the message without replying. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I decided to go for a walk. I hadn't done that in months without a specific purpose, without an errand related to them. It was always the bank for transfers, the supermarket to buy them something they needed, the pharmacy for Lena's medications. Today, I went for a walk just because I wanted to. I walked past the park where I had often taken Max as a child. I remembered that sweet boy who hugged me tight and said I was the best mom in the world. When had he become this man who treated me like an ATM with feelings? When did I start confusing love with money? When did I start to believe I had to buy my own son's affection? At the bank where I had so often made automatic transfers, I stopped in front of the door. The branch manager, Mr. Klein, saw me through the glass and waved. I had known him for years. He had processed every one of my transfers to Max and Lena. He had watched my account drain month after month to fill theirs. I went inside and walked directly to his office. "Mr. Klein," I told him, "I need to cancel the automatic transfers I have programmed." He looked at me, surprised. For 3 years, these transfers had been as regular as the sunrise. "Are you sure, Mrs. Richter? Did something happen?" His concern was genuine, more genuine than any interest Max had shown in me in recent months. "What happened is that I finally opened my eyes," I replied. "I want to cancel everything, and I also want information on how to protect my accounts. I don't want anyone else to have access to my money." While Mr. Klein processed the cancellations, my phone didn't stop ringing. Max, Lena, Max again. It was as if they had developed radar to detect when their source of income was in danger. I turned the phone off completely. "Mrs. Richter, Mr. Klein said as he handed me the papers. "I apologize for intruding, but in all these years, I have seen you be very generous with your family. I hope you are not being pressured to make these changes." His words touched me deeply. This man, who barely knew me beyond bank transactions, showed more genuine concern for my well-being than my own son. "I'm not being pressured, Mr. Klein. On the contrary, I have finally stopped pressuring myself." When I left the bank, I felt strangely light, as if I had left an enormous burden in that office. For the first time in years, my money was entirely mine. I had no financial obligations to people who saw me as a resource instead of a person. I went home and thought about all the things I hadn't done to please Max and Lena, the trips I hadn't taken to save money for them, the friends I no longer saw because I was always available for their emergencies, the hobbies I had given up because every dollar I spent on myself was $1 less for their needs. When I got home, I found 3 cars parked in front of my door, Max's, Lena's, and one I didn't recognize. I could see movement inside my house through the windows. My blood ran cold. They had keys. I had given them keys because I trusted them, because I thought they would one day take care of me just as I had taken care of them. I took a deep breath before opening the door. It was time for the first real confrontation of my new life. I opened the door to my house and saw a scene I will never forget. Max was sitting on my sofa with his head in his hands. Lena was pacing back and forth like a caged animal, and an older man I didn't know was going through papers on my dining table. My papers, my personal documents. "What is happening here?" I asked in a voice that sounded louder than I expected. All 3 of them looked at me as if I were the intruder in my own house. Lena was the first to speak, and her voice had that desperate urgency I had already heard on the phone. "Renata, thank God you're here. We need to talk. Mr. Fisher is from the law firm we consulted about your situation." "My situation?" The question came out of my mouth with a calm that surprised me. "What situation? I'm doing perfectly fine." Max finally lifted his head and looked at me with those eyes that once belonged to an innocent child and now only reflected financial panic. "Mom, we went to the bank and they told us you canceled all the transfers. Mr. Klein explained that you also blocked our access to your accounts. We don't understand why you did that." Mr. Fisher, a man in his 50s in a gray suit and a smile that didn't inspire confidence, approached me with an outstretched hand. "Mrs. Richter, I am Dr. Fisher, a family law attorney. Your children are concerned about your mental well-being and have asked me to assess the situation." I didn't shake his hand. Instead, I went directly to my dining table and collected all my documents that he had been reviewing without my permission. "These are my private papers. You have no right to look at them without my consent." "Mom," Max interjected with that condescending voice he had perfected in recent years, "we're worried about you. Your behavior has been very strange lately. First, you financially cut us off without an explanation. Then you don't answer our calls. We think you might need professional help." Lena approached and tried to take my hand with that fake tenderness she reserved for moments when she needed something. "Renate, honey, we know you're under a lot of stress. Maybe the loneliness is affecting you more than you think. At your age, episodes of confusion are normal." The word confusion echoed in my head like an alarm bell. Now I understood why they had brought the lawyer. It wasn't about helping me. It was about declaring me mentally incompetent and taking control of my finances. The same woman who had told me they only invited special people to their wedding was now treating me like a senile old lady. "I am not confused," I said with a firmness that silenced everyone. "I am clearer than I have been in years, and you are going to leave my house right now." Mr. Fisher interjected with that professional voice lawyers use when they want to sound reasonable. "Mrs. Richter, I understand you feel overwhelmed, but your children have a right to intervene if they believe your ability to make financial decisions is impaired. They have documented several concerning behaviors." Concerning behaviors. The laugh that came from my throat was hoarse, almost cruel. Like what? Deciding that my money belongs to me? Deciding to no longer finance the lives of 2 adults who treat me like trash? Lena jumped up as if I had slapped her. "We never treated you badly. You are part of our family. Everything you have will belong to us one day anyway. We are just speeding up the process." There was the naked, unvarnished truth. Everything I had would one day belong to them. In their minds, I was already dead and they were just collecting their inheritance in advance. It didn't matter if I had 70 years or 70 days left. To them, I was just an ATM with legs that had become problematic. "Out," I said, pointing to the door. "All three of you get out of my house." Max stood up with that angry, childlike face he made when he didn't get his way. "Mom, we can't just leave. We have obligations. The rent, the car payments, the credit card you co-signed for. You can't just cut us off from one day to the next." "I can't?" My voice rose for the first time in the entire conversation. "Who says I can't? For years I have paid rent that wasn't even in my name. I filled a refrigerator in a house where I was not welcome. I financed a life that clearly had no place for me." Mr. Fisher took a folder from his briefcase and placed it on my table. "Mrs. Richter, we have prepared some documents that could facilitate this transition. A power of attorney that would allow Max and Lena to manage your finances more efficiently. This would just be temporary until you feel better." I took the folder and, without even opening it, threw it directly into the trash can. "The only transition that is going to happen here is yours to the front door." Lena started to cry, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of frustration, of contained rage. "You can't do this to us, Renate. We were counting on you. We made plans based on your support. We bought things. We took on financial obligations because we knew we could count on you." "Obligations based on my money," I replied. "Not on my well-being, not on my happiness, not on my company, just on my money. And now that I have decided that my money is better used in my own life, I am suddenly a confused old woman who needs legal guardianship?" Max tried to approach me, but I took a step back. He was no longer the boy who ran into my arms when he had nightmares. He was a 35-year-old man who saw his mother as an obstacle between himself and a comfortable life financed by others. "Mom, we made mistakes," he said in a voice that was supposed to sound remorseful. "The wedding was a misunderstanding. Lena was nervous. I was under pressure. We can fix this if you just become reasonable again." Reasonable. The word tasted bitter in my mouth. Being reasonable means continuing to pay for your life while you treat me like a stranger. It means pretending it doesn't hurt to have been excluded from the most important day of my only son's life. Mr. Fisher packed his papers with the efficiency of someone who is used to having proposals rejected. "Mrs. Richter, this is not over. Your family has legal options. If you are indeed making irrational decisions due to mental health problems, a judge can determine that you need guardianship." His words were like a blow. I realized this was not just a manipulative family visit. It was a real legal threat. They wanted to declare me incompetent to manage my own affairs. "Mr. Fisher," I said, looking him directly in the eyes, "I suggest you do your research thoroughly before you threaten a 71-year-old woman who has managed her finances flawlessly for 40 years, who raised her son alone after the death of her husband, who ran a household and worked honorably until retirement, and who until last week financially supported two completely capable adults." Lena stopped crying and looked at me with a coldness that finally showed her true face. "This won't stay like this, Renate. We have rights and lawyers too." "Perfect," I replied. "Hire all the lawyers you want, with your own money, of course, because mine is no longer available to finance your legal tantrums." The three of them walked to the door with the wounded dignity of people who are not used to being told no. Before he went out, Max turned to me one last time. "Mom, this is going to end very badly for you. You're going to end up alone, with no one to take care of you when you really need it." "Max," I said with deep sadness, but also with crystalline clarity, "I am already alone. The difference is that now it's by my own choice, not by your neglect." As I closed the door behind them, I stood in my living room, surrounded by the most beautiful silence I had heard in years. It was the silence of freedom. That night, I couldn't sleep, but not out of sadness or regret, but out of adrenaline from having reclaimed control of my own life. I lay awake in bed, planning my next steps like a general preparing for a battle. If Max and Lena wanted to fight, I would give them a war. But it would be a war I would fight with intelligence, not with emotion. At 6 o'clock in the morning, I was already dressed and ready to go. My first stop was the office of attorney Mr. Weber, a man I had met years ago when I was handling my husband's will. Unlike Mr. Fisher, whom Max and Lena had brought, Mr. Weber had an impeccable reputation and specialized in protecting the rights of the elderly. "Mrs. Richter," he told me as I explained the situation, "what your children tried to do yesterday is more common than you think. It's called elder financial abuse, and it's a federal crime. The fact that they entered your house without permission and reviewed your private documents also constitutes a violation." His words both calmed and worried me. They calmed me because they confirmed I wasn't crazy, that what had happened was truly abusive. They worried me because I realized the situation was more serious than I had thought. "We have to document everything," Mr. Weber continued. "Every transfer, every gift, every time they pressured you for money. We will also change your will to protect your assets from future manipulation attempts." We spent 3 hours reviewing my financial records. Mr. Weber whistled when he saw the total sum, $33,400 in 3 years. "Mrs. Richter, with this money, you could have lived comfortably, traveled, and enjoyed your retirement. Instead, you completely financed the lives of 2 adults who didn't even respect you enough to invite you to their wedding." When I left Mr. Weber's office, I had a complete plan. First, I would change all the locks on my house. Second, I would install a security system with cameras to protect myself from future surprise visits. Third, I would open a new bank account at a different bank where they had no contact. And fourth, I would start living the life I had postponed for years. My next stop was the hardware store. The owner, Mr. Summer, had known me for years because I was always buying things to fix Max and Lena's apartment. This time was different. "Mrs. Richter, what brings you here today? Another emergency with your son?" he asked with the familiarity of a person who had silently witnessed my wasted generosity. "No, Mr. Summer. This time it's for my own house. I need to change all the locks, and I want them to be of the best quality." He looked at me, surprised, but asked no questions. While I was choosing the locks, his son Ethan, who installed security systems, came by. It was Providence in action. "Ethan," I told him, "I also need to install surveillance cameras, the complete system. The price is not an issue." While they were preparing everything for the installation the next day, I received a call from an unknown number. It was Lena calling from someone else's phone because I had blocked her number after the previous day's confrontation. "Renate, it's Lena. Please don't hang up. We need to talk like civilized adults." "Speak," I said dryly. "Listen, I understand you're upset about the wedding. It was a mistake. Max and I have talked about it, and we want to make it up to you. How about we have a special dinner to celebrate our wedding with you? We can do it at your house, cook together like we used to." The manipulation in her words was so obvious that I almost had to laugh. "Lena, how much rent do you owe exactly?" The silence on the other end confirmed that I had hit a nerve. Well, it's 2 months, $1,000 total. But I'm not just calling for that, Renate. We really miss you in our lives." "Do you miss me or my money?" I asked directly. "Both," she replied with a surprising honesty. "Renate, I won't lie to you. Yes, we need your financial help, but we love you too. You're important to us." "If I'm so important," I said, "why wasn't I important enough to be at your wedding? Why am I not important enough to get a call that doesn't ask for money? When was the last time you called me just to ask how I was doing?" Another silence. We both knew the answer. Never. "Lena, I'm only going to explain this to you once. For 3 years, you have treated me like an ATM with feelings. You used me. You ignored me. You humiliated me, and finally, you insulted me in the worst possible way. Now that the money is running out, you suddenly discover you love me. Renat, please. I cut her off. There is no please. You made your choice when you decided I wasn't special enough to be at your wedding. Now I'm making mine. I hung up and turned the phone off completely. I didn't want any more interruptions on my day of liberation. That afternoon, I went to the beauty salon I hadn't been to in over a year. I always canceled my appointments because Max or Lena needed something urgent, or because the money I had set aside for myself became an emergency for them. Mrs. Richter, my favorite hairstylist Cynthia called out. What a surprise! I thought you had forgotten us. I didn't forget you, Cynthia. I just forgot that I also deserved to be pampered. I treated myself to the full treatment: cut, color, manicure, pedicure. For the first time in years, I spent money on myself without feeling guilty. While Cynthia worked on my hair, she told me about her life, her children, her dreams. It was refreshing to have a conversation that didn't revolve around Max and Lena's needs. You look beautiful, Mrs. Richter, she said when she was done. But more than that, you look free. Did something good happen? Yes, Cynthia. I finally learned to say no. When I got home that afternoon, there was a car in front of my door that I didn't recognize. My heart raced for a moment, thinking Max and Lena might have come back with reinforcements. But as I got closer, I saw an older woman sitting on the steps of my porch. Mrs. Richter? She asked as I got out of the car. Yes, that's me. Can I help you? I'm Eleanor Brooks. I live next door. We've been neighbors for years, but we've never had a chance to talk. Yesterday I heard very loud voices in your house, and I got worried. Is everything okay? Her sincere concern touched me deeply. Here was a stranger who showed more interest in my well-being than my own son. Come in, Mrs. Brooks. I'll make you a coffee, and I'll tell you a story you won't believe. While I was making coffee, I told her the whole situation. Eleanor listened without interrupting, nodding occasionally, and when I finished my story, her eyes were filled with tears. Mrs. Richter, she said, you did the right thing. I went through something similar with my daughter 5 years ago. I also thought it was my duty to finance her adult life. I also believed they wouldn't love me if I didn't give them money. What happened? I cut off the money when I realized they only called me when they needed something. At first it was terrible. They threatened me, emotionally blackmailed me, tried to make me feel guilty. But after 6 months, my daughter called to genuinely apologize. Now we have a real relationship based on love, not on money. Her words gave me hope and confirmed that I had made the right decision. Do you think Max and Lena will understand one day? Maybe yes, maybe no, she answered honestly. But that's no longer your responsibility, Mrs. Richter. Your responsibility now is to live your own life. That night, for the first time in 3 years, I went to bed without worrying about whether Max and Lena had money for rent, for food, for their whims. I went to bed thinking about myself, my plans, my future, and I slept better than I had in years. The next day, Ethan and Mr. Summer came at 8 in the morning to change the locks and install the security system. While they worked, my phone didn't stop ringing from unknown numbers. Lena was still trying to contact me from different phones, but I had developed a new skill, completely ignoring calls that didn't suit me. Mrs. Richter, Ethan said as he installed the cameras. This system will give you absolute peace of mind. You can see from your phone who is coming to your house, even when you're not here. And if someone breaks in without permission, an alert is automatically sent to the police. The irony was not lost on me. I was installing a security system to protect myself from my own son, but it didn't hurt as much as it used to. It was simply a practical measure to maintain my newfound peace. While they were working, I decided to do something I hadn't done in years. Call my sister, Diana, in Chicago. We had lost touch because every time we talked, I would tell her about Max and Lena's successes, about how much money I had spent on them, about how proud I was to be able to help them. I now realized that our conversations had become financial reports disguised as family news. Renate, Diana answered, surprised. Sister, how are you? We haven't spoken in months. I'm good, Diana. Better than good. I'm calling you to tell you that I've finally come to my senses. I told her the whole story from the beginning, the secret wedding, the humiliation, the visit with the lawyer, my decision to cut off the funding. Diana listened to me in silence, and when I was done, her answer surprised me. Renate, sister, it was about time. Every time we spoke, it broke my heart to hear you brag about how much money you gave them, as if love could be measured in dollars. I wanted to tell you something, but I didn't know how. What did you want to tell me? That Max never spoke lovingly about you when I saw him at family gatherings. It was always, my mom helped me with this, or my mom bought me that, but never, I miss my mom, or I love my mom. It was as if you were a service provider, not a person. Her words hurt, but it was a necessary pain, like when a doctor cleans an infected wound. It hurts, but it's part of the healing. You know what else I noticed? Diana continued. Lena always spoke about you in the future tense. When Renate is no longer here, we can remodel her house, or when we inherit, we will invest in the business, as if they were waiting for you to die to really live. This revelation hit me like a bucket of ice water. They didn't just see me as an ATM, they saw me as a temporary obstacle between them and their money. While I was trying to make them happy, they were planning their future without me. After talking with Diana, I sat in my kitchen, processing all this information. Years of marriage to a man who truly loved me, 35 years of raising my son alone after my husband's death, and 3 years of financing 2 adults who saw me as a $100,000 obstacle. The doorbell rang, and on the new cameras, I saw it was Eleanor, with a mug in her hands. I opened the door, and she handed me a fresh brewed coffee. I thought you might need some company after everything you told me yesterday, she said, with that sincere smile I had already come to appreciate. We sat in my living room, and Eleanor told me more details from her own experience. My daughter said the exact same thing to me that Lena says to you. You're like a second mom to me. We're special to you. Everything will be ours one day anyway. Those are rehearsed phrases, Mrs. Richter. They learn them from the Emotional Manipulation Handbook. Do you think such a handbook exists? I asked half-jokingly. Not officially, but it seems everyone reads from the same book. Chapter 1 is Make Her Feel Indispensable. Chapter 2 is Create Constant Financial Emergencies. Chapter 3 is When She Resists, Question Her Mental Health. We laughed, but it was a bitter laugh. It was both funny and tragic to recognize such predictable patterns in our own children's behavior. Did you ever feel guilty for cutting off the money? I asked Eleanor. Every single day for the first 3 months, she answered honestly. But then I started to see the results. My daughter had to get a second job. Her husband stopped playing golf every weekend and started looking for extra work. They learned to live within their means, and more importantly, they learned that I was a person, not a resource. That afternoon, I decided to do something I had postponed for years: visit my husband's grave. I always made excuses not to go because Max or Lena needed something urgent, or because the taxi fare was better invested in one of their emergencies. The cemetery was quiet and beautiful. Robert's grave looked a bit neglected because I hadn't been there to clean it in months. I sat on the grass next to his headstone and talked to him as if he were alive. Robert, my love, I think I lost myself for a while. After you left, I put all my energy into Max. I wanted to be the best mother in the world, thinking somehow he would grow up without a father. But I think in the process, I forgot to be myself. The wind blew gently, and for a moment, I felt like he was listening to me. Our son has become someone I don't recognize. Or maybe he was always like this and I didn't want to see it. His wife is, well, you know how she is. The money you left for me to live peacefully, I spent it taking care of them. But not anymore, my love. I have learned. I cleaned his grave, replaced the withered flowers with new ones, and stayed there for another hour, simply enjoying the peace. For the first time in years, I was not in a hurry to get home to solve a crisis for Max and Lena. When I got home, there were 3 cars parked in front of my door again. My heart raced, but this time I was prepared. The cameras showed me that it was Max, Lena, and two other people I didn't recognize. Everyone seemed agitated, talking to each other and pointing at my house. I didn't get out of the car. Instead, I called Mr. Weber, my lawyer. "Mr. Weber, they are at my house again. This time they've brought more people. What should I do?" "Don't get out of the car, Mrs. Richter. I'll be there right away and I'll call the police. After our conversation yesterday, I requested a temporary restraining order. They are not allowed to be on your property." Minutes later, Mr. Weber and two police patrol cars arrived. I watched the officers talk to Max and Lena, saw my son gesticulate angrily, saw Lena crying again, but this time her tears did not move me. One of the officers approached my car. "Ma'am, you can get out safely. Your visitor is going to leave immediately." As I got out of the car, Max shouted at me from the street, "Mom, this is ridiculous. We're your family. You can't call the police on your own son." "Max," I replied with a calm that surprised even me, "family doesn't threaten lawsuits for mental incompetence. Family doesn't break into people's homes without permission. Family doesn't treat their mothers like ATMs. Lena screamed from across the street, "You're going to pay us everything you owe us. We have bills you co-signed for. You can't just abandon us like this," Mr. Weber interjected. "Mrs. Brooks, any future communication must be through my office, and I suggest you consult with an attorney before making collection threats, because my client has full documentation of all the payments she voluntarily made for 3 years." I watched them drive away in their cars, defeated but not giving up. I knew this wasn't over, but for the first time in this situation, I felt confident. I had professional help. I had emotional support from Eleanor. And more importantly, I had mental clarity about what was right and what was wrong. That night, Eleanor invited me to her house for dinner. I met her daughter, who was visiting, and I was able to see with my own eyes what a healthy family relationship looked like. They spoke respectfully to each other, asked sincerely about each other's lives, and laughed together. The daughter didn't ask for money once the entire evening. "I wanted that with Max, too," I confessed to Eleanor after her daughter had left. "And maybe you'll get it one day," she replied. "But first, he has to learn that you are a person who deserves respect, not just a source of income." For the first time in weeks, I went to bed feeling hopeful about the future. The next few days were strangely peaceful. The surveillance cameras showed me that Max and Lena were driving past my house several times a day. Sometimes slowly, sometimes they parked for a few minutes, but without getting out. It was as if they were studying my routine, looking for the perfect moment for their next move. Mr. Weber had advised me to document every one of these visits, so I kept a detailed log with the date and time. "Their persistence will work in our favor," he had said. "Every time they show up after we've told them not to approach, it strengthens our case for a permanent restraining order." On Friday morning, I was calmly having breakfast when the doorbell rang. The cameras showed me a very well-dressed young woman with a folder in her hands and a professional smile. I didn't recognize her, but something about her posture told me it was not a social visit. "Good morning, Mrs. Renati Richter," she said as I opened the door. "I am a social investigator from the Office of Senior Services. We have received a report that you may be in an at-risk situation and we need to conduct a wellness check." My blood ran cold. Max and Lena had escalated the situation. It was no longer just threats from private lawyers. Now they had involved the government. "Can I see your ID?" I asked, trying to stay calm. "Of course." She showed me an official ID that looked genuine. "I am social worker Mrs. Schmidt. Can I come in and talk to you?" I let her in, knowing that a refusal would have been worse for my case. Mrs. Schmidt sat down in my living room and took a form out of her folder. "Mrs. Richter, we have received reports that you have shown significant changes in your financial behavior, that you have cut off communication with your family, and that you have shown signs of paranoia by installing unnecessary security systems. We were also told that you have refused medical and legal help from your loved ones." Every word had been carefully chosen to make me sound like a mentally disturbed old woman. I recognized Lena's handwriting in the wording. She had always been skilled at manipulating words to get what she wanted. "Miss Schmidt," I said with all the dignity I could muster, "I would like to call my lawyer before answering any questions." Ma'am, this is not a legal interrogation. It's a wellness check. If you have nothing to hide, it should not be a problem to speak with me. The phrase, "if you have nothing to hide," infuriated me. It was the same logic abusers used to justify their invasions. If you're innocent, you shouldn't complain about your privacy being violated. Miss, I'm calling my lawyer. You can wait here or come back another day, but I will not answer any questions without legal representation present. I called Mr. Weber, and he was there within 20 minutes. When he came in and saw the social worker, his expression hardened. "Miss Schmidt," he said after checking her ID, "I hope you have a court order to be here, because my client is under my legal representation, and any unauthorized investigation constitutes harassment." "Sir?" Mrs. Schmidt replied with less confidence than before. "We have reports from concerned family members about the lady's well-being. It's our duty to investigate." "What family?" Mr. Weber asked dryly. "The same family that tried to get her to sign a power of attorney without representation. The same family that broke into her house without permission and checked her private documents. The same family that excluded her from important events while living off her money." Mr. Weber took a folder from his briefcase and placed it on the table. "Here, I have complete documentation of my client's financial and emotional abuse. $33,400 that were withdrawn from her accounts in 3 years. Systematic social exclusion and emotional blackmail. If someone needs to be investigated here, it is not my client." Mrs. Schmidt reviewed the documents with growing discomfort. It was obvious that the information she had been given did not match the reality she had in front of her. "Mrs. Richter," she said finally, "can you explain to me why you so abruptly stopped financial support for your son?" "Because I finally discovered they were using me," I replied simply. "Because I realized that to them, I wasn't a mother, but a bank account. Because I was tired of financing the lives of people who saw me as an obstacle." "But don't you feel it's your responsibility to help your family?" The question outraged me. "Miss Schmidt, my responsibility as a mother was to raise my son until he was 18, to educate him, and to give him the tools to be an independent adult. My son is 35 years old, married, and perfectly capable of supporting himself. Financing his adult life is not my responsibility. It is my choice, and I have chosen not to do so anymore." Mr. Weber interjected. "Miss Schmidt, would you consider it normal for a 35-year-old adult to be unable to pay his own rent without the help of his 71-year-old mother?" Mrs. Schmidt did not answer right away. I could see she was reevaluating the entire situation. "Mrs. Richter," she asked after a moment, "do you manage your own finances completely? I can show you my bank statements, my investments, my tax payments. Everything is current and in order. Do you live independently? As you can see, I keep my house clean. I take care of myself physically. I drive my own car. I have healthy social relationships with my neighbors. Do you take any medication?" "Just vitamins and occasionally aspirin. I don't have any medical conditions that require medication." Mr. Weber added, "My client has just undergone extensive medical exams as part of our legal process. She is in perfect mental and physical condition." Mrs. Schmidt closed her folder and sighed. "Mrs. Richter, based on this conversation and the documentation I have reviewed, I see no indication that you are at risk or in need of intervention. I will close this case." After she left, Mr. Weber and I remained silent for a few minutes. "Renat," he said finally, "this is going to continue to escalate. Max and Lena are spending money they don't have to hire professionals to try to have you declared incompetent." "Does that mean they are desperate?" "It means that exactly. What else can they do?" "They can file a lawsuit for incompetence. It's expensive and hard to win, but if they find a sympathetic judge and a psychiatrist willing to testify in their favor, they could get a guardian assigned." The thought terrified me. They could take control of my money? "They could try, but we have solid evidence that you are completely competent and that they are motivated by greed and not by genuine concern." That afternoon, I called Diana to vent. "Sister," she said after hearing my story, "do you notice how far they are willing to go for money? They are risking family relationships, spending money on lawyers and doctors, destroying their own reputation. all to get access to your bank account again." Her words made me think. Max and Lena had completely revealed their true nature. There was no going back. There was no possibility of a genuine reconciliation. To them, I had never been a mother or a respected mother-in-law. I had always just been money on legs. This revelation, although painful, was also liberating. I no longer had to wonder if I was making the right decision. I no longer had to feel guilty for protecting myself. They had proven for themselves that my emotional and physical well-being was less important to them than my money. That evening, Eleanor came to visit with a surprise. She had invited her friends from the garden club to meet me. "Renate," she introduced me. "These are my friends Cynthia, who you already know from the salon, Maria, Carmen, and Elfrida. We have all been through similar situations with abusive family members." We spent the evening sharing stories. Maria had had to set boundaries with a brother who constantly asked her for money. Carmen had cut off her relationship with a daughter who only visited when she needed money. Elfrida had had to change her will after she found out her grandchildren considered her their retirement plan. "What hurts me the most," I confessed, "is not losing the money I gave them, but realizing that I never had the love I thought I had." "Renate," Elfrida said with the wisdom of her 80 years, "true love cannot be bought or sold. If you had to pay for it, it was never real." Her words were balm for my wounded soul. She was right. I had bought attention, not love. I had financed an illusion. "You know what I've discovered?" I said to my new friends. "That loneliness, surrounded by people who don't love you, is worse than being lonely on your own. At least now, when I am alone, I am in good company." Everyone laughed, and we toasted to our newfound wisdom. That night, after my new friends had left, I sat in my garden, thinking. The stars shone brighter than ever, or perhaps I was seeing them with clearer eyes. For the first time in my adult life, I was completely alone financially. I had no dependents, no financial obligations to anyone but myself. And instead of scaring me, this reality excited me. I could travel when I wanted. I could remodel my house. I could buy myself nice clothes. I could donate to charities that were important to me. I could invest in my own future instead of financing the present of ungrateful people. Freedom tasted like hope, and for the first time in years, I wanted to plan my future. A month after the psychiatrist's visit, I thought I had finally won the war. I had settled into a beautiful routine. I calmly had breakfast and read the newspaper. I tended to my garden, had lunch with Eleanor or one of my new friends, and in the afternoons, I devoted myself to activities I had given up for years. I had started painting again, something I was passionate about before I became Max and Lena's personal financier. But on a Thursday morning, while I was painting flowers on my new easel, Mr. Weber came to my house with a grim expression that made my blood run cold. "Renate, we need to talk. Max and Lena have filed a formal lawsuit for mental incompetence in family court. They are requesting to have a legal guardian assigned to you." The words fell on me like stones. I knew it was a possibility, but hearing it out loud made it terrifyingly real. Does that mean they can take control of my money? If a judge determines that you are unable to manage your affairs, yes, he could place Max as your legal guardian, which would give him full control over your finances. I sat down heavily on my sofa, feeling the weight of the deepest betrayal I had experienced in my life. My own son was trying to legally declare me incompetent to steal my money. "Mr. Weber, what evidence could they have? You yourself have seen that I am completely competent." "They have statements from 3 witnesses who claim you have behaved erratically. They also submitted unpaid doctor's bills that you supposedly didn't pay, and medications that you supposedly hoarded without taking them." "But that's a lie. I don't have any outstanding doctor's bills or hoarded medications." "I know, Renate, but they have fabricated convincing evidence. They also have the statement from Dr. Lehman, who states that you refused to cooperate with a psychiatric evaluation, which they interpret as proof of mental decline." The manipulation was diabolical. They had turned my refusal to undergo an unnecessary exam into proof of a mental illness. They had used my instinct to protect myself from them as proof that I needed protection. "Who are the 3 witnesses?" Mr. Weber looked through his documents. Lena, of course, a neighbor named Mr. Davis, and someone who claims to be your pharmacist, Mr. Green. Mr. Davis was the neighbor across the street, an unpleasant man who had always had problems with me because my friends sometimes parked in front of his house. Mr. Green was indeed my pharmacist, but I didn't understand what he could have against me. "I need to talk to Mr. Green," I told Mr. Weber. "Something's not right." We went to the pharmacy together that afternoon. Mr. Green received me, surprised and nervous. "Mrs. Richter, it's good to see you. How are you?" "Mr. Green, I was told you signed a statement saying I show erratic behavior with my medications." His face turned red as a tomato. "Mrs. Richter, your daughter-in-law came in a few weeks ago and asked about your medications. She said she was worried because you were acting strangely." "And what did you tell her?" "I explained to her that you only buy vitamins and occasional aspirin, that you don't have any regular medical prescriptions, but she insisted that this was proof that you weren't taking adequate care of your health." Mr. Weber interjected. "Mr. Green, did you sign a paper?" She brought a document that said I was confirming that Mrs. Richter had irregular medication purchases. I thought it was for her health insurance or something. I didn't know it was for a lawsuit. My own pharmacist had been tricked into signing something he didn't fully understand. Lena's manipulation knew no bounds. "Mr. Green," I said, "I need you to write a statement explaining exactly what happened and clarifying that I have no problems with medications." "Of course, Mrs. Richter, I am terribly sorry for this misunderstanding." After the pharmacy, we went to confront Mr. Davis. When we knocked on his door, he received us with obvious hostility. "What do you want, Mr. Davis?" Mr. Weber said. "I understand you signed a statement about my client's behavior." "And you're right, I did. That woman is crazy. She's been acting strange for weeks." "Can you be more specific about the behaviors you observed?" "Installing cameras as if she lived in a war zone, having strangers visit all the time, yelling at her family in the street." I realized Mr. Davis had taken everything out of context. The cameras had been installed for protection. The strangers were my new friends. The yelling was me defending my house from Max and Lena's invasions. "Mr. Davis," I said, "do you know why I installed the cameras?" "No, and I don't care." "To protect myself from my son and daughter-in-law, who broke into my house without permission and threatened me." "That's what a crazy person would say," he replied cruelly. There was no way to reason with him. His statement was based on superficial observations, maliciously interpreted. That evening, Mr. Weber and I sat down to plan our defense. "Renate, we need our own psychiatric evaluation. I have a colleague, Dr. Moore, who is an expert in assessing mental capacity. She can officially confirm that you are completely competent." What if Max and Lena have bribed the judge? What if none of this matters because they have already decided to declare me incompetent? "Renate, the legal system is not perfect, but it's not completely corrupt either. We have solid evidence of your mental competence and their financial motivations. We are going to fight this." The next day, I went to my appointment with Dr. Moore. She was a woman in her 50s with kind but astute eyes. "Mrs. Richter, I'm going to ask you a series of questions and tests to assess your mental capacity. Take your time and answer honestly." For 2 hours, she asked me questions about my memory, my reasoning ability, my financial understanding, my emotional health. She also gave me cognitive tests and asked me to solve mathematical and logical problems. "Mrs. Richter," she said at the end, "your results are well above average for your age. You are not only mentally competent, but your cognitive function is excellent." "Doctor, why do you think my family is doing this?" "Based on what you've told me and the documents I've reviewed, this seems to be a classic case of elder financial exploitation. Unfortunately, it's more common than people think." I left the consultation feeling validated, but also sad. The professional confirmation of my mental health was a relief, but it also confirmed that the lawsuit was real and necessary. That afternoon, Eleanor organized an emergency meeting with all our friends from the garden club. When I told them about the incompetence lawsuit, everyone was outraged. "Renate," Maria said, "we will testify in your favor. We have been with you for weeks, and anyone can see that you are doing great." "Better than great," Cynthia added. You are clearer and stronger than many 40-year-old women I know." Elfrida, with her 80-year-old wisdom, took my hands. "Renate, my dear, what your children are doing is nothing new. For generations, greedy children have tried to declare their parents insane to get their money. But you have something many of these victims didn't have: documentation, legal support, and friends who can testify for you." Her words gave me hope. I was not alone in this fight. I had an army of strong women who had witnessed my transformation firsthand. "You know what the saddest thing about all this is?" I said. "That Max and Lena are willing to destroy any future possibility of reconciliation for money. Even if I were willing to forgive everything so far, there's no going back from this." "And maybe that's for the best," Cynthia replied. "At least now you know exactly who they are and you can act accordingly." That night, for the first time since this nightmare began, I really cried. Not out of sadness, but out of grief. I said my final goodbye to the son I thought I had, to the dream of a loving family, to the illusion that unconditional love was reciprocated. But something new also emerged within me, an iron determination not to let myself be stripped not only of my money, but also of my dignity and my freedom. The war had officially begun, but I was ready to fight. The trial came 3 weeks later. I woke up early, put on my best black suit, and looked at myself in the mirror with a determination I had never felt before. Today, not only my mental capacity would be judged, my dignity as a person, my right to live free from abuse, my value beyond my bank account would be judged. Mr. Weber came at 7 in the morning to go over our strategy one last time. "Renate, remember, the burden of proof is on them. They have to prove that you are incompetent. We just have to show that you are not." "And what if the judge is already biased?" "Judge Miller has a reputation for being fair. I researched his past cases, and he doesn't automatically favor families. He is dedicated to protecting the rights of the elderly." We arrived at the courthouse at 9 in the morning. In the hallway, I saw Max in a new suit that he probably bought for the occasion, and Lena dressed in black as if she were at a funeral. Maybe it was one, the funeral of our family relationship. When our eyes met, Max avoided my gaze, but Lena held my gaze with a coldness that confirmed that for her, this was just a business transaction. Their lawyer was an older, elegant man with the kind of confidence that comes from winning similar cases before. When he began his opening statement, his strategy was clear: to portray me as a confused old woman who had been manipulated by strangers to alienate me from my loving family. "Your Honor," he said in a solemn voice, "Mrs. Renate Richter has shown a clear mental decline in recent months. She has cut off all financial support for her family without a rational explanation. She has installed unnecessary security systems due to paranoia, and has isolated herself from her loved ones under the influence of neighbors and lawyers who are obviously taking advantage of her vulnerable situation." Every word had been carefully chosen to make my self-empowerment sound like dementia, and my freedom sound like external manipulation. Then they called their witnesses. Lena was the first to testify, and her performance was Oscar-worthy. She cried as she described how I had completely changed, how I had become hostile and paranoid, how I had isolated myself from the family that loved me. "Your Honor," she said in a trembling voice, "Renate has always been like a second mom to me. Seeing her mental decline has been devastating. We just want to help her get the care she needs." Lies, wrapped in convincing tears. When Mr. Weber cross-examined her, the cracks in her story began to become visible. "Mrs. Schuster, can you tell the court, when was the last time you called my client without asking for money?" Lena stammered. "Well, we always talked about many things. Can you give me a specific date?" "I don't remember exact dates." "Is it true that you and your husband got married without inviting my client?" "It was a very small ceremony." "Is it true that when my client asked about the wedding, you told her that you had only invited special people?" Lena's face turned red. Those words were taken out of context. What would be the right context to tell your mother-in-law that she is not a special person? She couldn't answer convincingly. Max was next. Seeing him on the witness stand, swearing to tell the truth while preparing to lie about my mental health, was one of the most painful moments of my life. This was the boy I had raised alone, the one I had dedicated my entire life to. My mom has always been very generous with us, he testified. But lately, she has become erratic and irrational. We believe she is being manipulated by people who are taking advantage of her. When Mr. Weber cross-examined him, the mask fell completely. Mr. Richter, how much money have you received from your mother in the last 3 years? I don't know the exact amount. Does $33,400 sound about right? Maybe. She's always been generous. And how many times have you visited your mother without asking her for money? The silence was deafening. Is it true that you and your wife broke into my client's house without permission and checked her private documents? We were worried about her. Is it true that you brought a lawyer to pressure her into signing a power of attorney? We wanted to help her manage her finances. Do you, at 35 years old, need the help of your 71-year-old mother to pay your rent? Max couldn't answer with dignity. Mr. Davis testified about my supposed erratic behaviors, but when Mr. Weber asked him for details, he admitted that he had never spoken to me directly and that all his information was based on superficial observations. Dr. Lehman testified that my refusal to undergo an evaluation was proof of mental decline. But Mr. Weber submitted the documentation of our evaluation with Dr. Moore, which completely refuted his conclusions. Then it was our turn. Mr. Weber first called Mr. Green, my pharmacist, who explained how he had been tricked into signing a statement that distorted my medication buying habits. Dr. Moore testified about my excellent mental state and presented the results of the cognitive tests, which had been flawless. Mr. Summer from the hardware store testified about my mental competence and explained that my decisions to cancel automatic transfers were completely rational and had been processed correctly. Eleanor and my friends from the garden club testified about my clarity, my newfound vitality, and my ability to maintain healthy social relationships. Finally, it was my turn to testify. I stood up with dignity and walked to the witness stand, feeling the weight of 71 years of experience, of wisdom gained through pain, of strength discovered in adversity. Mr. Weber guided me through my testimony, letting me tell my whole story. The $33,400 spent in 3 years, the humiliation of being excluded from the wedding, the constant emotional manipulation, the violation of my privacy, the legal threats. Mrs. Richter, Mr. Weber finally asked, why did you decide to stop financial support for your son and daughter-in-law? Because I finally understood that what I was getting from them was not love, I replied in a clear, loud voice. It was a commercial transaction disguised as a family relationship. My money was welcome, but I, as a person, was not. Do you regret your decision? I only regret that it took me so long to make it. Max's lawyer tried to make me appear confused during his cross-examination, but I answered every one of his questions with clarity and precision. When he tried to imply that my new friendships had manipulated me, I explained to him that for the first time in years, I had relationships based on mutual respect and not on financial interest. In his closing argument, Max's lawyer insisted that I was a victim of external manipulation. Mr. Weber's rebuttal was devastating. Your Honor, what we have seen here is not the case of an incompetent old woman, but that of a woman who has finally found the strength to free herself from years of financial and emotional abuse. The plaintiffs have presented no real medical evidence of mental incompetence. What they have presented is frustration, because their source of income has decided to exercise her legal and moral right to protect her own resources. Judge Miller retired to deliberate for 2 hours that felt like 2 years. When he came back, his expression was serious but clear. After reviewing all the evidence presented, he began, It is obvious to this court that Mrs. Renate Richter is in full possession of her mental faculties. Professional psychiatric evaluations confirm her cognitive competence. Her financial decisions, as painful as they may be for her family, are completely rational and within her rights. My heart began to beat faster. Furthermore, the judge continued, the evidence suggests that this lawsuit is motivated by financial interest rather than by genuine concern for Mrs. Richter's well-being. The court completely denies the request for guardianship. I had won. I had not only won the lawsuit, but also my freedom, my dignity, my right to live free from the abuse of those who supposedly loved me. When we left the courthouse, I saw Max and Lena talking angrily with their lawyer. Lena gave me a look of pure hatred before she walked away. Max looked at me one last time, and for a second, I saw something that could have been regret, but it was already too late. That night, Eleanor organized a celebration at my house with all our friends. We toasted to justice, to freedom, to the sisterhood of strong women who support each other. Renata, Elfrida told me, today you didn't just win a trial, you won back your life. She was right. For the first time in years, the future was completely mine. I could travel, I could love, I could create. I could live without fear, without guilt, without manipulation. 3 months later, I sold my house and moved to a beautiful apartment near the city center. I donated half of my money to organizations that protect the elderly from family abuse. With the other half, I began to live the life I had always wanted. I traveled through Europe, took art classes, and joined volunteer groups. I never heard from Max and Lena again. I heard from others that they had to move to a smaller apartment and that Lena had found a job for the first time in years. Perhaps the adversity would teach them what my generosity never could, the value of honest work and independence. Some nights, when I look at the stars from my new balcony, I think about the woman I was a year ago, fearful, manipulated, believing I had to buy love. That woman is dead, and in her place, someone has been born who has understood a fundamental truth. True love never has a price, and freedom is never too expensive. My name is Renate. I am 72 years old, and I have finally learned that the most important person I have to love and protect is myself. If you liked my story, you can support me by making a donation so I can write more stories. Thank you in advance. And you, what would you do in this person's place? I would love to hear your opinion, so please share it with me in the comments. I'm always curious about what you all think. And also write me where you heard this story. For more life stories like this, like the video, and subscribe to my channel. There are many other stories waiting for you. With heart